Good evening. On behalf of the Indiana University College of Arts and Sciences, I would like to thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Vanessa Clow, and I serve as the college's Director of Alumni Relations. Our Food for Thought live streaming series serves as an opportunity for alumni and friends to hear from faculty experts, explore topics of interest, and stay connected with IU and the College of Arts and Sciences, regardless of your location. I'm excited to introduce tonight's featured presenter, Dr. Justin Garcia. Dr. Garcia is a Ruth N. Halls Professor of Gender Studies and Executive Director of the Kinsey Institute here at Indiana University. His research focuses on the evolutionary and biocultural foundations of variation in courtship, intimacy, and sexual behavior. An award-winning educator and researcher, he has co-authored or co-edited dozens of scholarly articles, books, and book chapters. Following his presentation, Dr. Garcia will be joined by IU journalism and English alumna Elizabeth Bernstein for the audience Q&A session. Ms. Bernstein is a veteran reporter for the Wall Street Journal and writes a column on relationships and social psychology called Bonds on Relationships. You can submit your questions at any point during this evening's discussion. Simply click on the Q&A tab located in your webinar toolbar. Hover your mouse over your screen and your toolbar should appear. Now it is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Justin Garcia for his presentation. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Vanessa. And hello, everyone. I'm delighted to be here with you tonight, share with you a little bit about our data and hopefully have a fun conversation. And I couldn't be more thrilled that Elizabeth Bernstein from the Wall Street Journal, who I've known for many years, is going to be here tonight to help moderate one of our extraordinary IU alum. So tonight I want to talk about what we know from some of our research studies on people's romantic and sexual lives today in our digital age. And particularly I want to focus on what we know about singlehood. And there's a couple of reasons of why I'm interested in that. What you see here are two pictures, are a picture of gibbons, two gibbons. Gibbons are sometimes known as the lesser ape. They're a primate, somewhat closely related to humans in terms of they're not one of the great apes, but a little bit more distantly related. But what's really special about them, besides being absolutely adorable, is that they are socially monogamous. So gibbons form intense pair bonds with one another, and that they will cooperatively breed offspring and raise a family with another individual. Humans and gibbons are the only higher order primates among the apes that exhibit this behavior. So these guys will live in the forests of Southeast Asia, swing through the trees at speeds of over 35 miles an hour. They do what's called morning chorus to each other. In many ways, really letting others know that this is a territory that belongs to a couple, to a pair. And by training, I'm an evolutionary biologist. So for me, this is a really interesting question of why some species form these intense bonds and maintain these intense bonds throughout their life course. They do sometimes divorce, as it's called in the biological literature, but often these individuals will stay together unless one dies or is depredated. And they protect the territory defense, they raise offspring together, they build a life together. I know I don't want to overly romanticize the natural world. There's a lot of complications about any of these relationships. And in fact, even among gibbons, you see fairly high rates of infidelity. But for me, it was a question of really understanding, well, how does this relate to what we see in human systems? And biologists make a distinction between what we call social monogamy and sexual monogamy. And social monogamy is informing these intense bonds that we live our lives through. It appears that humans evolved this tendency somewhere around 4 to 4.4 million years ago, the tendency to form these bonds. So early in my career, I was interested in understanding that evolutionary process of the evolution of monogamy. But then the question came, well, then how come we have so many single people around us if we actually are seeing these intense bonds that people maybe have a tendency to form and cultures all over the world? So that's my starting point. And I want to sort of start there and then from there, try and understand what's going on with singles. And I'm going to talk you through some of our findings and then hopefully have a larger discussion. So as part of that crusade to understand why there are so many singles, in 2010, along with my colleague anthropologist Helen Fisher, who's a senior research fellow at the Kinsey Institute, we partnered with Match.com for a project that's called Singles in America. We just completed our 11th year of data collection with them. Every year, we collect a sample of over 5,000 people in the United States. It's what's called a demographically representative sample. So we have people of different sexual orientations and ages and racial and ethnic backgrounds and political orientations. People of every stripes throughout the country and of all ages from 18 to 95. And we really try and understand their attitudes and behaviors. We collect a different sample each year of 5,000 people. So it's a new cross-sectional slice of singlehood in America. And this data set, which now has well over 50,000 people in it, informs a lot of our theorizing and findings that I'll talk about tonight. And I'll occasionally talk about data collected from different waves. But one of the things that Helen and I tried to do with this study in our partnership with Match is understand, well, actually, are there that many singles and what are they doing and how are they shaping American culture? And it turns out that there actually are quite a lot of singles, more than we even anticipated. In the United States today, well over a third of the adult population is single at any given time. It's closer to a little over 40% at the most present data that's available. That's well over 100 million people that are moving in and out of romantic and sexual relationships throughout their adult life course. That's a radically different picture from just a few decades ago, and certainly different from a natural history of intense monogamy. So at least social monogamy, at least forming those bonds. So for me, the scientific question was, well, what's going on? Why are there so many people not in these relationships? Where are they finding their close connections? Are they untethered from the kinds of things that we think that humans want in places all over the world? Or maybe they're not. Maybe they're finding other ways to connect and to enjoy their lives. Maybe this isn't a universal desire. So for us, that was the initial question. And I'll talk through more of that. One of the interesting things about that, though, is that it's something different from what we saw in human evolutionary stories, where we tended to have quite intense relationships with the nuclear family. So we know that anthropologists will sometimes say it takes a family to raise a child, and it takes a village to raise a family. It's the idea that we're nested in these levels, these layers of social relationships that we can understand human behavior and experience within, that we're in these communities, but that there are these family units within those communities, and that at the top of that family unit is often a pair bonded couple. Now, I'm not in the business of saying whether it's good or bad that there's all these many single Americans. I think there's pros and cons to it. But for me, it's a question of it's something different. It's something evolutionarily unprecedented that we can come to understand how we're all navigating that space today with so many people. I mean, the other thing that I find really fascinating is we so often talk about things like the power of the woman vote or the influence of young Hispanics in the United States. Or one thing we often don't talk about is what is singles. They are a very diverse group in terms of demographics, but it's a group that has enormous capacity to influence American culture, to impact the economy, to change how we think about relationships and family life and paying taxes, whether or not you're married. So it turns out, I'm certainly not the only person who's thought about singlehood. A lot of scholars for over the last few years, particularly over the last decade, have been interested in the single experience. There's been some great work, for instance, by sociologist Bella DePaula, who has coined a term that she calls singleism. And in DePaulo's work, she highlights that singles are often stereotyped in all sorts of ways. They pay higher taxes. Think about those times you're invited to an event or a wedding with a +1, and you have to figure out who to bring. That there's all these ways that just in our everyday life, being single is inconvenient, is what she argues. But more than that, that we also see singles are stigmatized. As an example from one study that Paula conducted with colleague Morris, married people were more likely to be described as happy, fulfilled, stable, reliable, kind, giving, and loving. Single people were also more likely to be described as unsuccessful and ugly. And this next one I find really also interesting. Participants rated single in a study that they had descriptions of people in relationships or single and had to describe what they thought the person was like. The participants in a study rated singles as probably being more neurotic, less extroverted, less agreeable, less conscientious, less physically attractive, less satisfied with their lives, and as having lower self-esteem than partner targets. But here's the real kicker to those studies. There were no pictures involved. So we know that people are creating this sense of what a single life, a single person must be like. Now, I was talking just a few moments ago about changes over the last 4 million years, but to put it in perspective, just a few decades ago in human history, being single was considered somewhat aberrant and strange. In a 1957 poll, bachelors were categorized as immature, narcissistic, and even pathological. Single women were described by leading psychiatrists as sexually warped, lacking in the feminine instinct, and probably suffering from a bad case of penis envy. Now, we often think about singles today as sort of having this ability to live this exciting single life, to go out to restaurants and bars, to date whoever they want. But in fact, we know that there is this subconscious bias that they experience from the people around them. And we also know, as an example of just a few decades ago, that if you were a single man in the 1950s, in your 30s, you might be denied a loan for a home or a business. Because from the bank's perspective, why were you still single in your 30s? You were high risk. Now, as a social scientist, there's two ways we can understand that kind of phenomena. And one is that people are stigmatized because they're not engaging in the normative behavior. If people are expected to partner up young and get married, the question for the banker who's about to issue that loan is, well, why are you not doing that? Why are you not engaging in this behavior that other people are? Maybe you're high risk. Maybe there's something different about you. So that's one possibility. And the other is that even though people, maybe they don't want to do it. So there's the question of maybe you're single because you don't want to be in a relationship. Well, then something's wrong. Maybe you're single because you can't find a partner. Well, then something's wrong. So either way, we see that people get this social stigma about not engaging in what's expected of them in terms of relationship formation and maintenance. And there's a time period, some wonderful work by my Indiana University colleague, Amanda Gesselman, who's the Associate Director of Research at the Kinsey Institute, has looked at early in life, particularly, not very early, but early in adult life, so emerging adulthood, late adolescence, about from the teenage years to the early 20s, that there's a period in which if you don't show that you are engaging in dates or that you're sexually active, that you can become stigmatized. So that if you're, let's say, a 22-year-old virgin, that actually holds some stigma on the dating market because it's the same phenomena. Why are you not engaging in what your peers are engaging in? So we know that singlehood, despite this notion that it could be fun, actually is highly stigmatized in all sorts of ways. And some data from the Pew Research Center, this was from 2017, the numbers have stayed somewhat stable, although the most recent public reports haven't come out. You can see 58% of people of singles say they want to marry someone one day. But what I find really interesting is the other part of this pie chart. So as you can see, the light part, 14% say they don't want to get married. That's a little bit of a rise from a few decades ago in terms of, more than 10% of people who are saying that they don't want to get married. But what I find really shocking is the 27%, almost 3 out of 10, who say they're not sure they want to get married. That's a pretty big chunk of Americans who are saying, I don't know. I don't know about this thing that everyone engages in, this long-term relationship, this marriage formation. It's fascinating, and I think quite a lot of reasons why that's the case. So I'm going to jump through a couple of our studies now, and I won't talk too long, because I want to give us time to discuss with Elizabeth. In one of our studies, we looked at what was going on in terms of happiness. And what we tried to do is really understand single people compared to those who are married. So if you look at the red lines, those are the singles. And if you look at the green line on the right, those are the married people. But we did something else in this study. We took people that were divorced or separated and plotted them in as well, with the idea being that maybe ever being in a relationship, ever being married offers some buffering effect, comparing singles to those in relationships. And in fact, that's what we found. So when we look at happiness in all these different domains of life, it turns out that married people are a lot happier with their overall life satisfaction, their appearance, their family, their friendships, their love life, their sex life, even their leisure time. And if we plot people who are divorced or separated between them, it turns out ever having been in a relationship, ever having engaged in that culturally normative behavior has some protective effects for people compared to those that are single. So there is this sense for singles that the grass is greener, that there is this opportunity that they're not engaging in, that they could be happier. And that when they have that partner, it turns out that in a lot of the data, they do report on average, higher levels of happiness in all these different life domains. So we thought, well, why could that be? Maybe it's the singleism I just talked about. Maybe it's the social stigma. But then in another study, we wanted to look at stress. And I think this is part of what's going on. What we found is that singles are a lot more stressed than partnered people. Even though you might think that having a partner can at times be a little bit stressful. You are trying to accommodate each other's needs. You're trying to figure out ways to compromise. As part of what comes with relationships. But what we found is that overall singles are a lot more stressed, and they're more stressed in different life domains than the economy, in terms of psychological loneliness, social commitments, family commitments. Singles reported higher anxiety as well. And it turns out that the stress it's statistically mediated, it explained the higher levels of anxiety that we saw in singles compared to married people. Now, at the same time, I don't want to overly romanticize that every relationship is characterized by no stress, no anxiety, and lots of happiness. We know that's certainly not the case. But what we do know is that in the aggregate, on average, compared to singlehood, relationships offer a lot of buffering experiences for people. But when we think about this pattern, I want to be a little bit cautious, right? That not everyone has this ideal for a heterosexual monogamous marriage, that you're going to find someone, you're going to fall in love, you're going to stay together. Turns out that single experiences vary quite a lot, as do relationship experiences. And I want to talk about what we're finding in our research today about what some of those experiences are like. Take, for instance, single parents. They have very different experiences on the dating market compared to singles without any children. In one of our studies with my colleague Peter Gray at the University of Nevada, single parents with a young child, ages 5 years or younger, reported greater frequency of sexual activity and number of first dates compared to single parents with older children. Now, that might seem paradoxical. When we first saw this data, we thought, okay, you're a parent with young kids and you're going on more dates and having more sex. Where do you find the time to do that? How are you doing that? And what we think was going on when we really dove in and put in different adjustments in the data is that for some single parents, they're more motivated to find a partner. And part of that is that, particularly in the United States, this data is coming from the US, we have a system that's structured around really two caregivers for children in terms of parental income, in terms of the long days in school and pickups and drop-offs and activities. That's really hard to do on your own. So that even though if you're single with a young child, even though you have this enormous responsibility in terms of time and finances of raising that young child, you're probably a little bit more motivated to have a partner to go through that experience with. So the experiences of dating and sex for single parents are quite different than singles without kids. Interestingly, we also looked at how singles introduce their kids to their significant others. And for a lot of single parents, both single fathers and single mothers, in a sample of over about 750 people, they said that they typically will involve a child once they've dated or established a committed romantic relationship with a new partner, and that their child's opinion matters a lot. And I think that's an important part about what we understand about the psychology of human mating and relationships. My colleague Peter Gray and I, in a book we wrote about a decade ago called Evolution of Human Sexual Behavior, we argued that there is not a species on this planet that involves our kin in mating decisions as much as humans. We know that mothers and fathers and aunts and uncles and brothers and sisters and kids get involved in our mating and dating decisions. That's not true of any other mammal, certainly not to the extent that we see it in humans. And turns out that for single parents, they want to know how their children are going to respond to this person they're dating. Well, then it made us start to ask about something else. We said, well, what are other sources that singles might be getting some influence on people they are dating, or who else are they listening to? And in a study that was quite fun, we found that for some singles, they're listening to their pets. It turns out some of you may have heard stories of data that suggests that if you're have a puppy, you can pick up a date if you walk through a park. It turns out that's true. In some experimental studies of men walking through a park with a puppy and also walking through with a stroller with a baby, they're more likely to get someone's phone number if they flirt with them. But it turns out that the relationship with pets and dating is a little bit complicated. So that pets can help you get a date. Turns out if you have, for instance, pictures of dogs in your dating profile on online dating apps and websites, that can help you get more messages, our data and some other data sets suggest. In part because it shows that you are responsible. If you have pictures of a dog, or you're walking your dog, or you talk about being a pet owner, that tells another partner you can take care of yourself, you can take care of a dependent other, you have some empathy, you have some responsibility. Because what happens on the dating market is we're trying to pull some little seedlings of information about someone that we meet. And these become data points to go, oh, okay, you have a dog. Oh, that dog is well groomed. Oh, that dog is well behaved. You must engage in caretaking and training of that dog. Well, maybe you're a good partner because you can be responsible about things like that. We try and pull the pieces of information that we can whenever possible. So the takeaway, of course, is if you're single, take a picture with your friend's dog and put it on your dating app. And we also know that other aspects of life, other variation and individual differences are also important. We've also been doing a lot of work on dating later in life in some of our studies. And so Our Time, which is a sister site of Match, is for people who are 50 and older. We've done some work with them. What we found is that 72% of singles 50 and older say they're still open to finding love. So part of what we see in the United States today is not only that 100 million, well over 100 million of people moving in and out of relationships, it's a lot of people later in life that are moving in and out of relationships. I'll never forget, I was collecting some data for a study we were doing in India. And I spoke to this one man, a Sikh man in his 50s, and he said he was using a dating app. He was using Ushape.com, which is a popular one in India, in New Delhi. And he said he was dating for the first time in his whole life in his 50s. His first marriage had been arranged, and he was dating for the first time. And I asked him what that experience was like. What kind of partner was he looking for? And he said the challenge was he just didn't know what to do. He said, I'm so open, I want to find someone, but I've never done this. So, and we're seeing in all over the world that people are experiencing that they're getting back in the dating game, and at a time that things are so different. One of the things I really love about when we talk to older singles that are dating in some of our studies is a lot of them report things like their children or their grandchildren are telling them about dating today. That's a marked shift in what we call transgenerational information or knowledge transfer. Usually parents, grandparents, and parents tell children and grandchildren things about behaviors or etiquette or norms. And what we're seeing is a younger generation. It's a bottom-up effect that grandkids are putting their grandparents and grandparents on TikTok and dating apps and saying, well, this is how we do it today. This is how people are communicating. These are the new norms of dating culture. It's a fascinating trend in terms of understanding how courtship's changed in just the last few decades, despite the same tendencies for those 4 million years I talked about earlier. So one of the things I think that's important to remember is that there's a lot of diversity in terms of what singlehood experiences look like. And it varies based on sexual orientation. For instance, we know that on average, people, gay men and lesbian women are more likely to use dating apps than heterosexual people. It can vary based on race and ethnicity, on age, and what these relationship structures look like. There's a lot of diversity there. And that's what a lot of our work tries to understand. What are these differences for different people, for different groups? How do we understand all the variation in these experiences? As one example that I often think about is even the notion of a relationship having two people is a little bit more complicated than that. It turns out in one of our studies, and we replicated this finding in the following year, we found that about 1 in 5 Americans have at some point had what's called a consensually non-monogamous relationship, an open relationship. Now, it's not that many, not 21% appear to be in an open relationship or a consensually non-monogamous relationship throughout their life, but people try it. So we also know that many Americans try different ways of structuring their romantic and sexual relationships. And what's so interesting about today's digital age, it's this opportunity to go out and try and find people who have those same interests, to try and connect to people who maybe want to do those same things that you want to do. So there's lots of different ways that these relationships can look different, and they can also look different at different parts of our lives. Perhaps what you're looking for when you're 18 and a freshman entering IU or another university, or when you're in your mid-30s and maybe considering kids, or when you're in your 60s and perhaps on a different type of relationship. You have different needs. So those all become some of the questions we try and look at. One thing that's been really interesting, and one of the shifts in this whole process, has been the way that people use technology. So we know that there has been this proliferation of courtship technologies and how people meet each other. The most common, of course, are these apps like Match and Tinder and eHarmony and Bumble, all have apps. But what's interesting is that for some of these is that they're not super effective, at least at first glance. So we know people will download these apps and they'll go on and they'll swipe, trying to meet someone. And it turns out that in some data, it suggests that there's matching rates only a little over 1%. So you're doing a lot of swiping, but not getting a lot of matching. And then when you finally do get a match, you then have to correspond with that person and see if that conversation ignites some more interest on both parties. Right? What's so interesting about courtship is it's a two-way street. It's not just, this is who I'm interested in and what I like. It's, am I putting out what that person is interested in? So it becomes this dance, right? Courtship is this constant dance of what I want and what I can get and who I can attract. So we do all this swiping, we don't get that many matches, then we get a few matches and it's pretty hard to maintain a conversation. A lot of people can start to feel demoralized in that process, but they shouldn't, right? Because what the data tell us is that if you stick with it and you do it carefully, you can make some of these matches. And it turns out that a lot of people are meeting this way. And there are all different types of apps, right? Grindr is one that's popular for men who have sex with men and gay men. There's different platforms depending on what you're looking for. Is it a hookup? Is it a long-term relationship? But I do want to put a note of caution. One of the things I often hear from people is they used an app because they're looking for love or they're looking for a marriage. And I think that's the wrong expectation. What these apps do is they help you connect. They help you find someone. They're not going to help you find a marriage. In fact, what we know from all the studies is that it's really hard to predict a romantic relationship. It's really hard to predict what factors will make two people be in a happy long-term relationship. Probably because there's so much variation that even wonderful work by Samantha Joel, a psychologist using a machine learning technique, hasn't been able to find really, that code. In fact, if someone breaks that code, they'll be a very famous scientist and extraordinarily wealthy. But what we know is that part of it is that there's all these different factors, and those factors also change throughout our life course. But the apps are helping us connect. They're helping us find people. You find the people on these platforms, and then you have to engage in social behavior, have conversations, you get to know each other. And then the human brain kicks in. Then it does what it's done for those 4.4 million years and start to develop attractions, start to develop a bond, start to maybe fall in love. That process is in here. It's in our biology. It's not on a platform or an app. The apps just help us find a tennis partner, find someone who likes to travel, find someone with the same political or sexual orientations as you. That's what these technologies help us do. And in fact, a lot of people have used them for that. In the United States today, 1 in 2 singles have created an online dating app. And apps and websites in the United States today are the most common way that singles find someone to date. It's the most common way that they found their most recent first date. As a comparison, we know over 40%, this is right before COVID, over 40% said they met their partner through a dating app or website. Only 25% met through a friend and only 6% at a bar. So despite the idea that going out to bars and clubs and you might meet someone, turns out that statistically, you're far more likely to do it using one of these dating app technologies. In part because if you walk into a bar to pick someone up, not everyone there is necessarily single and looking. But on the apps, you have this focused group. There are people who cared enough to create a profile. There are people who are interested in relationships. You can do a little bit of screening of them. You end up speeding up that process of the search process of scanning around for someone who might be a good potential partner. And we know that these technologies have proliferated in terms of different demographics. So there are apps for people of particular religious backgrounds, of employment backgrounds, of ethnic backgrounds, of ages. This is an enormous industry really focused on helping people try and connect with someone. And I think that's really the big piece, is that they're connection devices. Now, for me, as I said earlier, I'm a biologist. For me, what's always been so intriguing about this is that these technologies are some way divorced from our senses. So we know that courtship involves hearing the quality of someone's voice and seeing them in their body language, smelling them, maybe tasting them, touching and feeling them, and engages all the bodily senses are involved in courtship. For a lot of these technologies, you don't get that. But what's interesting is that a lot of them have been starting to put in more information about things like you can have short videos, or you can do video chats, or you can have sound, with the idea that how do we engage more? And what we know from some of our studies, for instance, things like hygiene are important in your pictures, or people look at your mouth and smile and teeth in some pictures. Part of that is because if you only have limited data points, if I open up my platform and you have 2 sentences about yourself and 2 pictures, what I'm going to do psychologically is try and pull out as much information as my brain can to try and figure something out about you. So I might say there's 2 pictures. Okay, you're in a very good suit, so you're well dressed, but your lipstick is all smeared, and how come you didn't notice that before you got on a picture? So you start to pull in information. I'm not saying it's good information, but what we know is that we try to put together a story of what can we tell about this person. So it's also really important when using these technologies, not just what you're looking for and searching for, but again, remembering the information you put out, because just as you're searching, someone's searching for you, right? They want you to be their prince. So to give them that information, to give them opportunities for conversation and discussion is quite important. Now, at the same time, although we're using these apps and technologies, we also know that people are struggling with some of that sensory information. In a study I did with my colleague Amanda Gesselman at the Kinsey Institute, in a sample of a little over 1,000 partnered people in the United States, we found that 1 in 3 people say that they're not touched enough. My Kinsey colleagues and my gender studies colleagues told me I had to stop walking down the hall saying that there's a touch crisis in America. But we know that people are looking for this close connection. And that's not surprising, just like those lovely gibbons I showed at the start. We're a social mammal, that engaging in physical touch and connection, it's important to us. It's part of our natural history of grooming and physical touch. But the fact that a full third of people in relationships were told us in a national sample that they weren't touched enough, it tells us that although we're using these technologies to connect and find people, perhaps they're not really satisfying some of our most basic desires as a social mammal. Now, that said, and I'm going to wrap up in the next few minutes, that said, we also know that these technologies that people are using play a very important role in people's lives. People will often say to me, well, sex is very important in someone's life, isn't it? And I often think of this statistic from a study, this is many years ago now, from a Harris source, interactive poll, that people actually rate their mobile phones as being more important to them than their sex life. So when we think about the role of technologies and also laptops and other devices, they rate quite high. If you're forced to put it in a forced choice, people really want to use these technologies. So how are we integrating them into our intimate lives? Well, not always super successfully. In one of our studies, we found that 57% of single men and 61% of single women say they carefully evaluate a profile on these dating apps. Only about 3 in 10 say they swipe quickly through profiles. Now, but when we look at the back-end data, when we actually look at the data, how quickly people are swiping, they tend to swipe pretty quickly. Even if they say, oh, I'm being kind of thoughtful on this app, turns out that their behavior doesn't always align with their own descriptions of their behavior, which is true in a lot of things that we study in our lab group. But people are moving through these platforms kind of quickly and not always giving them the amount of thought to be successful. Now, if you're doing it to what's called gamification, if you're using these apps just for fun, that's fine. But if you have a good time, but if you're doing these apps because you want to try and connect with someone, we know that one of the things people need to do is they need to slow down. They need to slow down and be more thoughtful. And part of it is that the brain can't process that information fast enough. So the more we can convince people to slow down, read the profiles, look at the pictures, spend a few seconds on each one. And in fact, some of the app platforms have purposely done things to slow down users. Like maybe you have to scroll up and down to get chunks of the profile. Maybe you get a maximum of how many you can look at a day, things like that. So in another one of our studies, we looked at ways that people are communicating now. So if we're doing so much of it through these platforms, what do we think about, how do we have emotion in some of those messages? So we looked at things like emojis and emoticons and a bunch of a series of different studies we did. We found that individuals were using these emojis to try and communicate affect. And people who use emoji and emoticon tended to have more romantic and sexual connections. They went on more dates and they had more sexual partners. But there's also a limit, right? You know, people who use more than 3 in a given stream of messages were sometimes viewed as overly affective. That's the same as if you know someone around you that you might say, oh, they're so emotional. Their highs are so high, their lows are so lows. They are very expressive. Sometimes that can make people actually a little bit uncomfortable around you. But using some of them to communicate some genuine interest, to sort of give that expression, that little facial icon, it turns out that that's a way to increase the communication. It's a way to take something like a text message or an email and make it feel more connected, feel more alive. And that's what people were doing. And it turns out those people were having more success in their intimate life because they were embedding it with more emotion. Now, at the same time, that's the problem in a series of studies. People who use emoticons in work emails, particularly when women do it and young people do it, when they use emoticons in work emails, the findings show that they're taken less seriously. So there's a context for this, right? You might want to do them in and you might want to do them in work emails if you particularly want to be, understood as kidding or understood as being warm in an interaction, but not necessarily as seriously. But in the dating context, it turns out that it could be really positively associated with connection. So we also did a few studies looking at sexting, and I want to jump through some of those really quickly and then just end on some things that we know about COVID. And in one of our studies, we looked at rates of sending sexually explicit messages to each other. And what we found was that about 1 in 4, 1 in 5 people have sexted at some point in their life, depending on gender and other demographics. It was particularly common among younger people. But what we found is, one of the things I'm often asked in our sexting studies is, well, it's a problem, right? And I go, well, it depends. It's a problem if the images get shared. That's when you tend to see things like bullying and people having negative psychological and emotional reactions because their images have been shared. So the question is really, are they being distributed? And also who are you sexting with? It turns out that in our data, we found that most people were doing it to flirt with a relationship partner. So if you're in a long distance relationship, for instance, some degree of sexting actually might be beneficial for your relationship. Again, I'm not in the business of telling people what they should or shouldn't do in their relationships, what's good and bad, but for some, there might be beneficial impacts. But the real concern we have is when these images are shared. And it turns out that in our data, we found that about 1 in 5 people share a sex message they received from an intimate partner with friends. And when they share it with on average of 3 more friends. So the real issue is the non-consensual distribution of those images to other people. That can be associated with self-esteem issues, with emotional concerns, with bullying from others, embarrassment. We then did a much more complicated study with 2 colleagues of mine in Croatia, where we followed a group of adolescent girls in a secondary school for a 16-month period. And this was to really dive in. What the big question in the sexting literature has been is it associated with low self-esteem, depression, and anxiety? And some studies say yes, some studies say no. The problem is, to really answer that question, you need to do a longitudinal study. And there really hadn't been a careful one done. So we did this long-term study and followed this cohort of girls. Actually, my colleague Sasha was the mastermind behind this much larger study. And what we found is that tracking these adolescent girls, that sexting was associated with lower self-esteem, more depression, more anxiety at baseline. But if we did the longitudinal effect, engaging in sexting didn't seem to exacerbate any of those psychological symptoms. So that is to say that sexting doesn't seem to be the cause of self-esteem problems, depression or anxiety. But if you do it in the first place, there might be some association. So maybe you had low self-esteem, maybe you had some anxiety in the first place, which maybe influenced whether or not you engaged in the sexting, but it didn't seem to be causal. And that's just the map. I'll go through that quickly. And then one other thing we found in sexting is this issue of people sending unsolicited images. And it turns out that quite a lot of young women in particular report this on things like dating apps. And when they're just starting to get to know someone, that men are sending images of their genitals to them. And there's been a lot of reports of this in the news. In fact, the dating app Bumble, which is based in Austin, Texas, tried to get the Texas legislature to make it a form of sexual harassment when it happens. So in one of our studies with my colleague Alexa Marcotte at Indiana University, we tried to better understand that. We found was that a third of men who we studied, straight men, gay men, bisexual men, reported sending at least one genital image to someone else. And often they were quite unsolicited. But here's the part that's really interesting. When we asked men why they sent these images, they say, because I was asked for one. 50% said the other person sent it first. 45% of men said to turn the other person on. 4 in 10 said to flirt with the person. But here's what happened when we asked women how they actually felt when they received an unsolicited genital image from a man. And what we found was that most common responses of women was that they reported being grossed out, followed by disrespected, violated, and then curious. So this is what we call a sexual misperception bias, where one gender over-perceives the interests of the other in terms of interaction. So men were thinking it was playful, and women were saying, no, this is actually quite disrespectful. So I think the take-home message for us is that when we think about these technologies, we can use them a little bit more to not just use on our own, but how we can think about using them to lean in towards each other. How we can use these sort of technologies, whether we're sexting or whether we're using online dating profiles or any other number of ones, is really to try and form connections. And part of what that pattern is that in this digital age, we're seeing what my colleague Helen Fisher calls a pattern of slow love. And what we reported in one of our studies a few years ago is that the majority of singles polled say they're looking for a serious relationship. And in fact, we can talk about this later. I actually think these numbers are going to go up much higher in the world post-COVID after the pandemic. But people are taking longer in the courtship process. They're spending more time. They're using technology. They're using dating apps. They're filling out profiles. They want to get to know someone. They want to do a little sneak peek at first and look at your picture and then send a few messages before you go to coffee or dinner. And maybe you date for a few months before your official boyfriend or girlfriend or partners. And historically, what's so different is that just a few decades ago, marriage often happened very shortly after first dating. It was often the mark of the beginning of a serious partnership. And particularly for young people today, marriage is considered the finale of a relationship. People do it after they've known a lot about someone, their family, their background, their goals, their personality, their fears. People really want to understand their partners before making something like a marital commitment today. And I just want to end really quickly because Elizabeth's with us, and then I'm going to ask her to join me in about 1 minute, is her wonderful column with the Wall Street Journal. This is the piece that she did at the very start of COVID, Sex in the Time of Coronavirus. And it looked at some of the data that we had collected here at Indiana in the Department of Gender Studies and the College of Arts and Sciences, and also at the Kinsey Institute. And looking at the impact of the pandemic on people's romantic and sexual lives. And what we found was that overall, people reported a decline in sexual frequency during the pandemic. They reported declines in their frequency of sexual behavior, declines in their quality of their sex life, but about 1 in 5 people added something new to their sex life, even though the frequency had gone down during this outrageous time, this global trauma that so many people were experiencing. But when we look at the things that people were adding, it was often things like they tried a new sexual position or they shared a sexual fantasy with a partner. These are people that were partnered. When we look at people who are single, they included things like sexting or using cyber sex of some sort. But I think particularly the things like looking at fantasies, how interesting that it took this pandemic, for many people, for the first time to ever turn to their partner and say, is there something you've always wanted to do? Is there anything that you've ever fantasized about that we've never talked about? Overall, I think that's actually a positive story for people's relationships. Despite the decline in frequency and quality, something was happening with people's relationships. And part of what was happening is we were rethinking what it meant to be intimate during the pandemic. So I'm going to end with these quick little findings from our Singles in America study the data we collected in the middle of COVID. So although, again, people weren't having sex, one of the more entertaining findings is that 1 in 4 singles said they had sex with a non-romantic roommate. And I think even that is turning to people that you maybe wouldn't have otherwise. People said that they're ready to get back to dating. 2 in 3 singles said they're ready to date in real life again. And here's the one that I find really interesting and exciting, given what we're thinking about technology in people's lives. 50% of people said they fell in love while video dating during COVID. 68% said they used it to determine if they wanted to go on a real date with someone in person, a vibe check, as young people will call it. So what I think is happening, I'm actually convinced that video dating is a new stage in the courtship process, and it's here to stay. Because we're using these technologies. The world around us has changed. And again, we maybe don't get that much sensory information from text messages in a chat. But if we can infuse it with emojis, with video chat, with hearing voice, seeing someone's dress and their artwork and their body language, the brain can start to take in more information. Courtship process that we've evolved over millions of years will start to do its thing. So I want to thank my colleagues at IU, Amanda Gessman, who I run my lab with, Helen Fisher, who I talked a lot about in our single study today, some of my trainees in our lab group, and of course, all of our wonderful supporters that fund our work. And thank you so much. And I'll invite Elizabeth to join the party.
Hi, Justin. Hi, everybody. It's really great to be here. And it's wonderful to see you, Justin, and to get to chat again about relationships. We had some, I'm going to start because we had some Q&As in our little lineup here. So I wanted to start with those because I think these came in early and people want to know, I'm sure, the answer. Sarah Ray Rondot, if I pronounce it right, says, there's also a difference, of course. This is referring back to the very beginning of your talk with information, your data on married versus single. She said, there's also a difference, of course, between wanting to get married and wanting to be partnered monogamously. Perhaps marriage is falling out of popularity, not so much coupledom.
I love that. And thanks, Elizabeth. And thank you, Sarah, for that question. Exactly. I think that's what it is. And that's certainly the trend we've been seeing in Europe, for instance, that people are still forming relationships. And overall, now, not everyone, there are certainly there are people who report being consensually non-monogamous, people who report wanting to remain single. But people want to form these relationships, but marriage, the sort of legality of the marital union, is changing. So what we're seeing in a lot of data, it was in Europe, and now we're seeing in Australia and other places, we're now seeing it in the United States, very high rates of cohabiting, of people that maybe live together, and those people get some of the benefits. But what's really interesting is in all the studies, even if you look at single people who live on their own, single people who are dating, single people who are and live on their own, single people who are people who are dating and cohabiting, people who are married people somehow do the best in terms of these psychological outcomes. Now that's an extraordinary statement, but there's something about the marital union, and I say that as a biologist. I'm not overly committed to notions of marriage. I fully view it as I'm interested in what happens in your brain when you love someone, and you can form this legal relationship, but for somehow that translates into more well-being and more positive outcomes. And I think it's because for so many people, that union becomes a contract, an agreement, an understanding. It's a display of commitment that you understand with each other, but also it's that stigma. It's the people around you understand. And that just seems to bubble over. But Sarah's absolutely right. Not everyone wants that.
And then Kristen's asking, Kristen Gallagher wants to know, is the data on happiness broken out by gender? He said he thinks he read about this, that the experience of happiness was different for men and women.
Yeah, so there's a larger happiness literature. There's actually a journal on happiness studies. I don't know that literature quite as well. There are quite a lot of gender and sex differences in terms of happiness. In terms of, for our study, for relationship structures, gender did not have a big effect on happiness, if I remember correctly. But it does when you start to get into some other of the, when you break it down into certain categories. So for instance, in the case of women, they often, as a gender scholar, we often talk about things like double duty. So women might, for instance, they might, even if they're both in a heterosexual couple, let's say, for instance, both men and women might be in the workforce, but women bear more of the responsibility for the domestic emotional labor. Elizabeth, you've written about this in your Wall Street Journal column. And so sometimes things like that. So depending on what you're measuring, women might bear more of the burden for things like stress or emotional labor or home labor. But the happiness data, at least in terms of relationships, there's not a huge gender effect. And part of that is because, as an evolutionist, when the sexes have very different evolutionary bottom lines, you expect gender difference, sex differences. But when it comes to love and close relationships, the genders are more similar than different. And that's because we faced a similar problem in our evolutionary past. And that was forming these intense relationships to survive, not just raising offspring. I think that's often the mistake people often make. It's forming these intense bonds are not just about making babies. It's about surviving the uncertain world around us.
That's a good point. Is there any difference in the data according to age? Are younger people or older people happier or less happy?
Oh, that's so good. I didn't talk about that, but that's a really cool finding. It turns out that happiness has a U-shape pattern, and people are very happy when they're younger. And then you kind of go through life and stuff gets kind of thorny for a while. And then when you get older, happiness upticks again. So it has this U-shape when we look at it by age. So the happiest people, sometimes in their relationships, but just overall, are the young and the old. And somewhat for different reasons. Older people are least likely to settle for things. They're sometimes we might think, well, when we get older, we get rigid, but part of that is also you get more sure of what you want and you seek that out, and that's what you won't settle for something else.
And then I remember years ago seeing some data that showed that married people were happier until they had kids. And I'm wondering, is that part of that dip? Can you talk about that? Married people with children, and how does their happiness hold or not hold?
We're going to really impact some people's lives tonight.
With the child rearing.
Yeah. And so we know that kids, what's interesting about the introduction of children in couples and in family life, they have these sort of paradoxical effects. And on the one hand, there can be extreme sources of joy and happiness for individuals and couples and families, but they're also extreme sources of stress, particularly in heterosexual relationships where it's been most studied. Often men struggle with getting attention from their spouses to then, why is this child getting the attention I used to get? That's why you see sometimes peaks in infidelity. You can often see more marital discord around when there's children and babies that first emerge. So kids can impact happiness. Again, it depends on in what context. If it's overall life satisfaction, maybe not. If it's in terms of sexual satisfaction, kids definitely, particularly newborns, have a big impact on that. Part of that's hormonal, part of that's just time. So they can have these really complicated impact. And what's interesting is that for many people, particularly new couples, you might think, okay, I want to have kids, or okay, we want to buy a house. And then you go and do it, and you have to maintain that house or renovate that house, or you have to, for instance, flipping houses. I'm addicted to some of these shows on, flipping homes. It can be really bad for a couple to flip a home together because it's just so much decisions, conflict, discussions, disagreements. Kids are the same. You maybe never realize that you have fundamentally different ideas about how to raise them. It gets better though. The data shows that if you have second and third kids, that you've kind of worked a lot of it out the first time.
That's fascinating. I love that. Here's another question for the audience. What did the data show us to be the most beneficial aspects of a digital or Zoom first date before an in-person date?
Oh, I love that. Great question. So what a lot of people reported was that they like to do these video dates or these Zoom dates for what's called a vibe check. But really to get a sense of, I think I could talk about video dating all day long. And Elizabeth, you've heard me get excited about these data. So what's interesting is if we think about dating, a lot of people get anxious about going on dates. It can be take up your time. It can be financially expensive. You have to figure out where to go. There's a lot of sort of gender norms about picking up bills and trying to sort all that out. The nice thing about a video date is that stuff kind of melts away and it gets you a little bit deeper than just chatting on an app or texting. So it's this nice sort of middle step between first connecting and going on the IRL, the in real life date, and thinking about things like negotiating, paying for bills and what to wear and how much to spend and how long to travel and how many hours. Particularly at a time that a lot of people particularly in the US, are very busy, they're time constrained, and they can often get anxious about dating.
So I'm curious, do you have any research-based tips here? The
Oh my
advice
God.
columnist me wants to know if people they need tips and strong advice for video dating. Do you have any evidence-based help for us?
Oh my gosh, it's a good one. I think one of the things that's really good is that we from some of the data we collected from last year and a little bit more this year, is I think the degree to which you can use video chats to just connect and get to know someone, but really think about it as a date. Think about your lighting, think about what you're wearing. Even what I thought was, and I never thought about this, but we found that a lot of people last year were incorporating activities into their video dates. They were playing a game with each other. I think that's great. And it turns out that doing games is a great thing to do on a date, right? You get to see someone's personality. Are they funny? Are they stiff? Are they, and maybe you prefer one or the other. Maybe you want someone more serious. Maybe you want someone more playful. Are they kind? Are they going to let you take points? Are they, right? So you can make it an activity that you get to know something about someone, not just, what did you have for dinner tonight? This is what I had. This is what you had, right? And that's informative. Maybe I found out you're a vegetarian, but how do I learn something about your personality?
No, it's a great idea. What kind of games were they playing?
Oh, so some people, actually what we found really funny was some people were working out together on video chat dates.
Great people.
Yeah, I think it was 8%, if I remember, said that they had worked out. And Helen Fisher, my colleague, who you know, we both were like, who does that? Well, it turns out 8% of Americans do it. So people were doing some things like that, or activities, other things. The other thing that's really interesting is that some people were watching a show together, or whether it's on streaming like Netflix, or watching a television show or a movie, either over chat, but some of the streaming services allow you to kind of watch at the same time. There's features. I actually think that's fascinating, because there's a literature from years ago, pre-pandemic, that long distance couples actually can benefit from things like watching the same show, because it gives you something to connect over. So we both watch the episode and then we chat and be like, well, what'd you think of that? Here's what I thought of that. The things you might do if you lived with someone or saw them all the time, but when you're not in the same space, maybe because COVID didn't allow it, maybe just because you're long distance, maybe because you're just getting to know the person, that shared activity gives you opportunities to connect about, right? So, or for instance, if we were on a date, I might say, Elizabeth, grab that red book on your bookshelf behind me and tell me what about it. What do you like about reading it? How do you then integrate yourself into that person's life? That's quite important. It's studies by our psychologist, Arthur Aaron, show that we want to try and find out how we can get ourselves into that person's life. I want to imagine our life together. I want to imagine, that book that we're both reading, that thing that excites us both.
So it's about the connection.
Yeah.
Is it about me sharing with you, or I should be asking questions? Like it's a very delicate dance, right?
Oh, exactly. And I think that's the hardest thing. And the piece of advice I always tell my friends when they're on dating apps is it's the both. It's I want to look at your profile and say, oh, wow, I see that one of your pictures is in Paris. I was there 5 years ago. When were you there? And make it have that. But the trick is, and so many people don't want to fill out their profiles, right, on dating apps. And you have to give someone enough information to do that to you, right? You have to have that picture with your puppy where they say, oh, what kind of dog is that? Or picture of hiking and say, oh, you really like hiking. You have to give someone enough information that there's an opportunity to connect. What we do know based on data is don't just send someone a block of text. You want to say like, oh, I saw a picture of you, boating. And do you like to boat? How often do you do it? I've always wanted to. Or you want to find something to engage a conversation. And exactly as you said, connect. It's most important part.
You're looking to draw them out and find that common ground, right? So back to that, the actual profiles of dating. I wanted to go back to that. Like, again, is there evidence-based like advice you have on what your profile should look like? For example, like smile and show your teeth. You mentioned teeth. Like, do you have any great advice for us that works?
Yeah. So actually,
I've got you, Justin. I'm getting the advice.
I know. Oh my God.
I know people out there want it.
But no, this is great. Oh my gosh. So we know that things like pets actually in photos can be quite helpful. We know that something that shows. So one thing to think about as you set up your profiles, if you're really adventurous, show some pictures that show that. I remember once a young man showed me his photos and he was on a motorcycle and then he was in a sports car. And I said, "You own a sports car?" He said, "No, that's my cousin's." I said, "Oh, you ride a motorcycle?" And he said, "No, I just took a picture of my friend." And I said, "Well, the image you're putting out is that you're a risk-taking bad boy." And he's like, "No, I'm looking for love." And I just thought, well, that's not, okay, I get it. And I get why he put those pictures because it made him seem fun and exciting. But keep in mind, like, what's the message that you want to put out with your image? What kind of profile of people you want to attract? Because they're going to use that to make inferences about who you are. And that's the first filter. So pictures that have good images of the face, images that showing smiling and expression, action images that show you doing things that are important to you. The data do show over and over people who have a puppy in their picture, they get more engagement, particularly men when they do it.
A certain kind of puppy? I mean, are some breeds better than others?
I don't know. Maybe. I don't know a breed. That's a good question. This is
Which then begs the question, should your puppy come on your video date?
Yeah. Oh, well, it certainly gives you something to talk about, right? So it can be, if you told me you were a pet lover, then yes, maybe, right? Because it gives you more to connect. And here's his name or her name and how long I've had them. All opportunities for connection and engagement, which can be quite exciting. So I'm trying to think what else. Action images, and the other is filling out the profile information with things about you that are honest. Now, everyone tries to put their best foot forward. So sometimes there's a little bit of white lies that happen, and that happens. But be honest. Don't put pictures that are 20 years old or look like a different person. Because what will happen is when you finally meet the person, they'll feel that you were disingenuous, and it's over as soon as you meet them. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Can we go to the COVID data? I'm still so fascinated by that. When I talked to you for that story you mentioned early, it was early in the pandemic. Now we're, much further along. And I was wondering if, you can update us on some of that information. Some relationships actually came out of this stronger, right? Or coming out stronger. Some were not. I'm wondering if you know anything about the strong ones, like what did those relationships have that led them to get through the pandemic stronger?
Oh, yeah, that's a wonderful question. So my colleague Esther Perel said at one point in the pandemic that there were like cracks in our relationship. And what COVID did is it let the light shine through those cracks. And for some people, if you had a relationship, let's say, characterized by domestic violence or a lot of turbulence or problems, this was just too much. It was too much stress. It was too much of each other. Those relationships, some of them got really bad, characterized by violence, abuse. They fell apart. They separated in other cases. But if you had a good relationship, what's really interesting about the very reason we evolved these intense relationships millions of years ago, again, it's not just for baby making, it's for weathering the uncertain. This is one of the theories I've played with in my next book, The Intimate Animal. I really focus on this idea that we weather uncertainty with our partners. And this is the greatest test that many of us have seen in our lifetime, right? This moment of uncertainty, that if you could turn to your partner as a source of support, emotional support, physical support, of crying through this, laughing through this, those couples seem to be brought closer together. And some wonderful work by my IU colleagues, Bill Yarber, Stephanie Sanders, and others, what they found was that in a study of married people, close to 80% said their marriage got a lot better during COVID. So although some people had troubles and problems, most people were saying actually this was a moment that their relationships got more intense, more close, because it was their time of need and they realized my person was there for me when I needed them, right? And that's the existential question. That's the question, how many of us when we've been dating have turned to a close friend and say, well, but are they really going to be there for you when you need them? This was the grand test. Were they there for you when you needed them? Mm-hmm.
It was a major test.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. Well, I have a question here from Danielle ARP, please forgive me if I'm making a butchery of your name. In clients, she says, in clients I work with, I've noticed males becoming increasingly frustrated with women as a whole because they feel consistently rejected on apps. This has further led to a generalization that all women hate them or that they're not worthy of love. Did this come up in your data at all? I'm wondering about the long-term implications of these generalizations.
Yeah, oh, thank you for that. I mean, I think I have two minds of that. I think on one, in some ways, that's the narrative that we see among some of these there's sort of a more problematic group of men that we can see on the internet that will talk about like incels, which stands for involuntary celibacy. Often there's an expected entitlement to access to women and access to women's bodies and their attention. And we know that's very gendered, particularly in North America, but in a lot of the developed world, that men often feel entitled to women's time and attention and bodies and interests. And when they don't get that, can really struggle, and some can actually be quite violent. That's arguably what many feminist scholars have been writing and thinking about in terms of the problems of the patriarchy for decades. So there's that issue. But the other issue that Danielle talked about, that I think the other aspect of that is that both men and women, but particularly men, often can start to feel unmotivated. They can feel a little bit demoralized on the apps. So in one of the studies a few years ago, Tinder reported close to 2 billion swipes a day. But I think it was 1.8 billion swipes a day in total they were registering, but only 26 million matches. So that's a match rate of 1.44%, if I remember correctly. That's pretty low. That's, you could swipe a lot. Now, but there's a difference in that, to Danielle's point. Women get more likes than men on average. We know that on average, women will get more likes, they get more first messages. There's a sort of gendered pattern of that. So for a lot of men in particular, they can start to feel really demoralized really fast. And I think the trick is really trying to fill out more of your profile and focus in on the people that are what you're looking for. One problem we see, this great study by my friend and colleague Elizabeth Bruch at University of Michigan, is that people tend to they aspirationally date on apps. And we tend to look for people that have what's called a mate value, when researchers will assign a general number in a scale to someone that are about 25% higher mate value than ourselves. We tend to try and talk to people who are more attractive, more wealthy, better dressed, better profile information. And what can happen is we aspirationally look for these certain people, but we don't really have the conversations with others, or we're not sending enough messages or filling in that information. And you can feel kind of crappy after a while of doing that. I think that's very real and I think, as Danielle is saying, as clients are saying it can be really hard for some people. I don't know that there's great advice other than to kind of stick with it, but also to recognize that for some people, it's too daunting of a challenge to do sort of the apps. And some of those people have found great success with matchmakers. And I first wasn't sold on this. It's a huge industry. They can be, some of them are very, can be cost prohibitive. But sometimes that more traditional matchmaking of having someone who can get to know you and connect you with people, some people have great success with that, but it's quite costly.
That's interesting advice. And I always wonder if there's a big sort of discrepancy between the numbers of men and the numbers of women that show up at matchmakers. Do you know?
Yeah, it depends on the service. There tends to be, a lot of them tend to be men with a bit more financial resources on average, often because they're just so expensive. And then sometimes the matchmakers will pull in clients, or they'll pull in people into their database that they'll try and match their clients with, often because they're people who maybe don't have enough time to do dating, or they're really struggling with it and they have the resources to get someone to help. A lot of the dating apps now, like Match, for instance, the ones that you pay for, if you use Match, there's a dating coach service that's involved with it. So the other thing is dating coaching has gotten really popular, and it can be really helpful for people to help build their confidence and to just talk through maybe mistakes they're making on their platforms, the questions they're asking, the information, like the motorcycle pictures they're putting up on their platform.
And to help you when you're flagging, like when your confidence is down, like there you go, you've got a coach. Justin, I'm curious, do you have any thoughts on how this pandemic is going to change? I know this is a big question, but how will it, a few thoughts on how it'll change our relationships going forward?
Sure. I'm going to say something that I think is actually kind of optimistic. And I think that what we've watched over the last almost 2 years now, even though we've had these declines in sexual frequency that you were the first person I talked about that data with, Elizabeth, when we had it, and we've seen these declines in sexual frequency. I think actually what we're seeing is people are putting more attention towards close relationships and intimacy and finding that person that they can weather the storms with. As you know, and some others might know, I spent a lot of my early career writing about hookups and casual sex, and then I got older and I wrote about love. And but what we found, I actually think that I don't think hookups are going away. People will still have casual sex, but what we're seeing is that historical moment, that sort of flush moment of so many college students engaging in at least one hookup. I think that we've had this moment that people were worried about who it was safe to hang out with, certainly who they want to kiss. More people in the data now are reverting to the 3-date rule before sex in a new relationship, and some new data that we just collected a few weeks ago. I think people are gonna slow down. I really think this is a moment that after COVID, we're gonna see people putting more time and energy into a close relationship, on nurturing those deep connections. That's not to say sex is going away or casual sex is never gonna happen. I think it will. I think it's gonna be a lower priority for many people, particularly young people. I think so. I think the future is about connection and intimacy.
That's fantastic. And I love your hopeful spin on that. And it's a great place to end this too, with all of it. Justin, you're fabulous as always. I really appreciate you talking to us about all of this interesting stuff. And thank you everybody for joining us. And thank you, IU, for having me.